Welcome to the Put On Waivers Media Group, home of the Put On Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
In his next endeavor, if it's not with the Raiders.
Yeah, no question about it. Before we head over to the offensive side of the football, I want to thank Willie Preston, new subscriber, Kenny Scantlin, also a new subscriber, and Walter Clark leaving a comment in there about USC, and then we got some other stuff from Jim Bavina. He has a lot to say on on our comment board. So keep those comments coming, if you will too. We would definitely appreciate that. Let's go to the offensive side of football. Let's talk about offensive linemen. This offensive line is going to be it's obviously it's when you have a non-mobile quarterback, you have 1, 2, 3 non-mobile quarterbacks. You definitely need to have a good offensive line. So you got Miller, you got Parham, you got James, Van Roten, Illuminor, Munford, Mute, and Wagner. Wagner looks like a big could be a big signee from the free agent class, undrafted free agent class. What are your thoughts about this offensive line?
Yeah, I think the starters across the board is you're going to have Miller, Parham, James, Van Roten, Illuminor, or Mumford, one of those two guys.
You're missing a name that I'm very excited about.
Alex Bars is not on here. Then you have to start thinking they kept 8 last year, so they may keep 8 again this year. And then who's the backup on game day? Because if you're keeping 8, you need to have 7 active. So whoever the backup guard is going to have to be ready to play. And I know a lot of people like McClendon Curtis. He's an undrafted free agent. He's big. He moves well. We saw some right tackle snaps in the game last night. It's hard for me to keep him because I don't think he's ready right now. If something happened to a starting guard or tackle, I don't want to throw him out on the field. So I'd like to get him out of the practice squad. He hasn't played much. There's not a lot of tape on him. He was an undrafted free agent. So I don't think he's going to get claimed by another team and put on their 53. It came down to Mutai and, believe it or not, Meredith for me. I thought Meredith played pretty well yesterday. You saw him pull through the hole, open up some holes in the running game. But I just kept going back to Mutai's a little bit better pass blocker at this point than Meredith, and he's got the potential to move people with his power. He's still developing. They brought him in last year. He's a big guy. He can play both right guard and left guard. And if anything happened to James, then Parham slides over to center and Mutai slides over and plays left guard. So I ended up keeping Mutai, and Wagner's just kind of played the whole game yesterday against Dallas. You didn't kind of notice him out there. So he's not doing things that they're getting tackles who are left on islands notice with false starts or penalties or getting beat with the pass rush. He's just going out there and doing his job. And I think the way Justin Herron has played the last 2 weeks, I don't see him staying around. And then Illuminor could always go over and play left tackle if anything happened to Miller. And I just like the size and the ability for Wagner to be a right tackle long-term. And they do like Mumford as kind of that jumbo tight end as well, that extra blocker if they go 6 offensive linemen. So there's a role for all of these guys. So I wanted to keep a 9th, but I just there wasn't a guy that stood out and said this guy needs to be on the roster. And if Mutai doesn't make the team, it wouldn't surprise me. If they did keep Bars, who can play on the inside, or they did keep Meredith, or maybe they keep Grasso as the backup center. But I ended up going Mutai. I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
The group is, it's important to have this group in sync and ready to go because of the fact that, these quarterbacks are not going to remind anybody of Randall Cunningham. So they really do need to get that together. So you have 3 tight ends here. You got Mayer, you got Hooper, Horsted instead of Fotheringham. Do you feel like they have enough blocking here to get it? Because that was the big thing, with Waller, was no blocky, no Rocky, right? So do you feel like they have enough blocking here to help in the run game, and then when they want to go play action, they can just fake that block and just kind of slip through and get some seam passes going with this group here?
Yeah, originally when I put this together after the game, I did have Fotheringham on the roster, but then the more I thought about it, Fotheringham's a better special teamer. That's why I originally went with him.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started thinking, okay, Mayer is gonna be a blocker. He's gonna catch the short stuff. Hooper's kind of just adequate at a lot of things. If they do want to run the football and go with heavy personnel, then you bring in Mumford to be the extra blocker. But Horsted can actually win vertically, and he gives you a threat up the seam, gives you something these other two tight ends don't really give you, which is speed down the field. They can dial up plays for him when they want to get him involved. He plays okay on special teams. I know you're giving up a little bit there. Fotheringham could also play H-back or go play fullback if anything were going to happen to Johnson. But I have someone else on the roster that can do that, who we'll talk about in a minute. But I just think ultimately the ability for Horsted to work vertically, he's the only one of this group that's going to really run down the seam and put pressure on the defense. That's what gave him the nod. And then I think they could use Wagner or Mumford in the blocking game, run game, when they really need to want to run the football.
All right, so we got that done with the tight ends. And then now, wide receiver, we have obviously Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfro, DeAndre Carter. I thought, definitely going to make the team. They got Trey Tucker in the drafts, and then Dorsett makes this squad as well. A good mix of, guys who can do stuff on the inside in the slot, and then also get something deep down the field. We know Carter can do things in special teams, so that's probably one of the reasons why he's going to make the squad. And I think Dorsett, some people just are like, it doesn't matter how old they get, they still can just run. Dorsett can still fly. So we definitely, him and Tucker can still fly. So you have some nice variety there with the Raiders receivers. This is a pretty good receiving core, probably one of the top receiving cores in all of football.
Yeah, the one thing they don't offer is a lot of size. And I know Cam Sims made some contested catches because of his length. I just want to – I like Dorsett as the sixth guy because – and I know he played late in the game yesterday, but he only came in after Keelan Cole got hurt. So he kind of probably just had to run in and play. But you saw him play inside. He played the slot, played outside. He could run vertically. He knows the offense in and out. He can help Tucker and Carter and those guys learn this offense because he's been in it. And I just think having that extra speed guy on the outside, because the only other guy that's really a speed guy that you can play on the outside is Tucker. But he's so small that we've seen when he's running out there, like, it's not really creating a lot of separation on those comeback routes, or guys can get their hands on him and kind of move him a little bit. So if he's not up to speed and he's not producing as an outside vertical threat, then you need a guy like Dorsett on this team where you can just put him in, and they have to respect the speed. If they try to play one-on-one with him, then you could throw some balls down the field. And I just think he can do a little bit of everything in this office. And it doesn't give you much in special teams. That's kind of the one hiccup. But then I do think Carter and Tucker can play special teams. And obviously some of these guys won't be active on game day. I do think early in the season, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of Tucker because they're probably going to want to play Carter. And then if you want to, you can put Myers and Renfro in the slot as well. And then that you still need that outside guy. Christian Wilkerson made a late run yesterday. I just think it's too late, and it's hard to find a spot on him for this team. I would love to have him on the practice squad. I liked him since I saw him early in camp, but I just, guys that go out there and play every snap of 3 preseason games to get all those targets usually don't make the team, or else they wouldn't be out there running around that much. So sometimes you just got to pick the guys sitting on the sideline with baseball caps on, because there's a reason why they're not playing. I think you're muted again.
I'm not gonna go crazy on the. I mean, this is clearly. I mean, we pretty much know about the wide receivers. We're going to talk about that in depth. As far as a fullback goes, we can, we got the fullback. Johnson's going to be there. Not worried about him. The running back, Jacobs just signed. He's back in fold. Obviously, they're going to share some carries this year, right? It's not going to be the Jacobs show as much as it was before. You do have Amir Abdullah on third down. Brandon Bolden is scholarshiped on this roster, and then you have Zamir White as well too. So,
Bolden's your special teams captain, so that's why he's on this team. He's going to play all the special teams. He would, in my opinion, would be the backup fullback. If anything happened to Johnson, he knows the offense. He's a little bit bigger, heavier. He could go in and play fullback to get you through a game if you needed him to. He's the backup third down back. He can be a short yardage guy. Like, he could do a little bit of everything in a backup role. But I do think the special teams does carry weight here, because the guys that aren't starting have to play special teams for the most part. So your special team core guys are going to be like the Teamers, the Boltons, the Boldens. Those are the guys who are going to be running down and playing on every coverage unit. So that's why he makes the team. And again, just the leadership to have him around the younger guys like White. He can really help White along during the game when Jacobs is out there bowling. White should be in Bolden's back pocket asking him everything about every play. And I just think that he stays. He had a touchdown in the preseason. He can run the ball, he can catch the ball, he can block, he can play special teams. Doesn't do any of it great, but does it all enough to when you're down to your third or fourth back, you could do a lot worse. And then obviously Britton Brown being hurt all camp didn't help him. Damian Williams made a late push yesterday. I just think he's more veteran, practice squad insurance. He looked good. He showed a lot of vision.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's enough to cut your special teams captain. You're going to have a pretty special reason to keep a fourth running back. And I just don't think any of those guys approach that level where you're going to move on from Brandon Bolden at this point.
Makes sense. When you break it down like that, then it makes sense. I'm not. I mean, I just can't. I don't love Bolden on the roster, but like, I mean, he does. I mean, he fits the role that they need him to fit, and he can do some of those things that you spoke about. So, I think Abdullah is a little bit. Abdullah, I do like Abdullah on third downs. He can help this team move the football on screen passes and things like that. Not a bad blocker if they want to keep him in for and pass protection. The quarterback position, people talked about Hoyer being it looked like Hoyer is going to be the second QB, not the third QB, which is some people that bothers some people in Raider Nation. They talked about the Raiders talking about that openly, saying that it could be subject to change. It says a lot about what O'Connell did in the preseason, how much they like O'Connell. But Jimmy G is going to be the starter, and I think that's where we start from there. Jimmy G, Hoyer, and then O'Connell as your quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm keeping all three, just because I think with the teams that being able to carry three quarterbacks, one, the contract with Brian Hoyer makes it pretty hard to move on from him unless you just want to say screw it and eat $4.5 million guaranteed.
100%.
You could if you wanted to. I do think with every team having the ability to carry three, someone somewhere in this league with young quarterbacks would probably snatch him up. And I think he's better suited staying on the roster, helping O'Connell. It might be a game-to-game thing. Like you said, I do think if it's early in the season, it's probably Hoyer. If it's on the road in a hostile environment, I don't think you want Aiden O'Connell going into Buffalo and coming off the bench for his first action. So you may see the veteran who understands the offense. I do think by the time we get to like week 6 or 7, this will be a moot point. It's going to be O'Connell. But I do think early in the season, it does make sense. There's no reason to rush O'Connell out there. Let him get his feet wet. Let him see what Sundays look like. Let him see what preparation for a game week looks like before you just throw everything on this kid. Mm-hmm. And for all we know, Garoppolo could get hurt very early in the season, and then that changes the dynamic where just because to finish a game as a number 2 with Hoyer, that makes sense. But if something happened where Garoppolo is going to miss weeks, then obviously I think O'Connell jumps to the front of the line if you need him to play an entire game. But to ask him to come off the bench and try to make plays on the road early in his career, I think is just a little too much at this point. And if it got to that point anyways, if teams are down to their second or third quarterback, everyone else is really going to have to play well. It doesn't matter who the competition is to win that game. So I don't see it as a big issue. Now, if we get to week 14 and Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt and we get Brian Hoyer fed down our throat for 5 or 6 weeks, then we have some serious issues. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. So if something happened where Garoppolo is going to miss a lot of time, I do think this regime will hand it over to Aiden O'Connell.
What's the biggest takeaway from this roster? Because I'm looking at this roster and it looks like we talked about, like, quote unquote, let Ziegler cook and and Josh wait till Josh gets his guys. This roster is pretty much, I'm trying to find, it's not a lot of guys who aren't his on this roster. I mean, this is his roster. So I mean, and his quarterback. So what do you think when you were breaking this down? What was like the positions of concern and the positions of great depth?
I like the wide receiver room. I like the edge rushers. Obviously, when you have Chandler Jones, a first-round pick, and Tyree Wilson, I think there's some young guys on the defensive interior. Assuming Young can start playing better than what we saw on tape. But I do like what we've seen out of Silvera. Hopefully we get a bounce back here from Nichols. Jenkins has shown enough as an interior run stopper to give the defensive interior some hope. The biggest takeaway I have is there's quote unquote depth on this roster,
Yeah.
but the depth is a bunch of guys from other teams that got let go in free agency the Raiders have kind of compiled together, which scares me a little bit. Like there's no depth in the linebacker room. The depth that's in the cornerback room hasn't looked very good this preseason. To be honest with you, that last game, Shelley Long and Robertson didn't look very good. So this team's going to need to stay healthy on the defensive side of the ball because the drop-off happens pretty quickly. There's some young guys that might be exciting down the line, but they're not ready to play for a team that has aspirations to make the playoffs. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, I'm still concerned about the depth along the offensive line. Right now, the backups are an undrafted free agent and a guy they signed off the practice squad a couple of weeks ago. So the fact that they didn't really address the offensive line in free agency or the draft, it's still an issue. 2 years into this, the offensive line depth is still an issue. And if anything were to happen to Colton Miller, you can pretty much kiss the season goodbye.
Yeah, I'm not. Yes, you are correct. You are correct. For me, I don't want to like put a whole lot of. I like Marcus Peters. I just don't want to put like everything in that box and think that like he's gonna be 24 from years ago. He's going to be a guy who is, if he gets stuck in man coverage, it might be an issue. But if you allow him to, if you get into third and longs where you can play some zone, you can let him just kind of lurk and, that lurk in Madden, if you will, and pick some balls off, get some PBUs, but pops the ball up in the air for somebody else to get an interception. That could be something that's nice. I really want to see, the rookies, Smith, Bennett. I want to see those guys young. I want to see those guys play. Silvera, I want to see them play and start contributing as the season goes along. I'm kind of expecting Tyree Wilson to give me a whole lot. I expect it because like he's getting to be healthy. Every day he's getting healthier. He's on the field. He played recently in that game against the Cowboys, which I thought was very good. But I want to see him just become a disruptive force when the real bullets fly, if you will, against Denver. I mean, those are the kind of things you kind of want to see. He's gonna make mistakes. He's gonna be out of position sometimes. Gonna not be in the right spot here and there. But when it's third and long and those moments come, it'd be nice to see him batting passes down, like getting to the quarterback, becoming that top 10 pick. Pedigree that we want him to be, because I mean he's gonna get, whether it's fair or not, he's gonna be continuously compared to the defensive tackle in Philadelphia. I mean, you can say what you want. I mean, it's gonna happen every week, and people are gonna be watching saying, "Well, we could have had so and so," but we want to see him just and he should be able to get one-on-one matchups that he can handle if Jones can play. And also, if Crosby's on the field as well, when is Crosby not on the field? Knock on wood.
Yeah, I know Raider Nation expected Tyree Wilson to be prime Myles Garrett or Lawrence Taylor yesterday in his first action, but I thought he showed and flashed why he was drafted where he was.
Yes,
he's long, he's powerful. I saw a lot of people saying he doesn't bend. Well, we knew that when they took him. Like he wasn't a speed guy that was going to bend the corner. He's a long, powerful guy that's going to rely on speed to power, long arm moves, ability to jack a guy up off the ground and move him like he did yesterday and get to the quarterback. If you want this guy to be Von Miller and dip and dive and do ghost moves and all that, or Yannick Ngakoue with a cross chalk, that's not Tyree Wilson's game. He's a power rusher. He did make a stop in the run game, and there was other times where he got handled like on a crack block from wide receiver and he got one-on-one handled by a tight end. That can't happen, but this guy's only had contact for like 2 practices.
Yeah.
And they're not going to ask this guy to go play 50 snaps week 1 in Denver. He'll get maybe 15 or 20 in certain situations behind Chandler Jones. And I expect him, hopefully, by week 5 or 6, once he gets his legs under him, and then he should start showing what he can do. If we get a redshirt year where he's playing 5 to 10 snaps a game and gets 1 sack, that's a huge problem. But let's wait for the season to play out and see what happens. I thought he flashed the power. Young's the guy I'd be concerned about based on what he's done in the preseason action he's played. He hasn't really shown a lot for a guy that was a third round pick that's supposed to be able to use his hands and be a disruptor in the run game. That just
Mhm.
hasn't shown up. And he hasn't really shown much in the pass rush department as well. And I think he played in 2 of the preseason games. So right now I don't see him being a starter along that front. So
Mhm.
I think he's a guy that's going to have to earn his snaps. And I mean, if it was a rundown, I'd feel much more comfortable with Silvera in there right now. Just the way he can move bodies. So I think you're going to have Nichols, Jenkins, Tillery, and then you're going to have Jones and Crosby outside them. Those are the 5 guys I anticipate. And then you're going to rotate in Young, Farrell, those guys for some snaps. And then when they go to a nickel or they go to a 4, when they take one of those linebackers out or one of those defensive linemen out and have 4 down linemen, then you're probably playing Nichols and Tillery because those are the 2 that are going to give you a little bit of pass rush and on
Yeah.
his passing downs. And then you're going to slide Wilson inside at times just to get him on the field.
Yeah. Trying to look at any other points here as far as this roster goes. Next week is we're previewing a game, right? Are we previewing a game next week? Is that so? We're getting ready we're actually getting for actual real football next week against the Broncos here, and it's gonna be important. It's gonna be important to win that game because we don't know what the flight they're taking next after that game. So they have to come out and be ready to go. And as far as that goes, I give you one question real quick before we head out. See, Jim wants to know about can Josh McDaniels improve on his time management, keeping leads, and can the Raiders get over 6.5 wins? That Vegas, I think the Vegas put out 6.5. I think I go first real quick. I think that as far as the time management goes, I mean that's kind of time management thing problem around the NFL is just a weird thing. I mean with me because it's like I mean there's a lot going on during the game, but you're the head coach. You should be able. That's what you're trained to be able to handle those situations. Keeping leads, I mean, that's about just being aggressive. If you think you're gonna run the football at people and just whatever, all the time, it's not gonna work. But I mean, he does have a better quarterback for his system. So there's times where he had like a 17-point lead, but then Derek Carr, overthrows Abdullah in the end zone. They could have been up by 4 scores, and instead of being up by only 3. Those things really matter. And I'm gonna use just Ziegler's words. Ziegler's talked about this team. It's based on wins and losses. So like if we're gonna have another year where he only improves the team by 1 win, and it's his 4th season coaching, and it's gonna be 4th season coaching, 4th non-winning season. I personally wouldn't know what the hell we're doing, but it's not my team. I root for him, but it's not my team. I don't own him.
Well, let's say I'm going to say yes on the 6.5. I think they're going to win more than 6.5. I hope they do because
Yeah,
I'll be going to this.
financially.
I'll be
Yeah,
cashing a ticket if that happens.
exactly.
But um, it's a tough schedule.
Uh-huh.
I do think that the first game out of the box will set the tone. It's a division game. It's a road game. They're going to have to find a way to sweep the Broncos and then split with the other 2 guys or get 2 wins against the Chargers. They have to figure out how to get to 4 wins in the division to have any chance of the
Yes,
tiebreakers. If we want to
100%.
start talking the P word before
Uh-huh.
week 1 kicks off, but I do think the time management thing that's not exclusive to Josh McDaniels. That's an
No,
issue on
it's
every
everybody.
team.
That's what I said. Yeah.
You could pull the tape on every team and find incidents where you think they did it wrong, and I think holding a leads has a lot to do with how the defensive plays, but I also think it has a lot to do with the execution of the offense, not just not executing when they had leads. They did something right to get the leads, and then it kind of went away. Now, whether that's injuries to Waller and injuries to Renfro and teams loading up because they know you're just trying to run the ball with Josh Jacobs. Having said that, I do think the NFL is about star power. The NFL is about guys where the other coordinators, when they go to sleep, they have to worry about. The Raiders have 3 of those guys. There's not a lot of teams when you start looking around the league that have 3. They have Crosby, Adams, and Jacobs.
Yep.
Those guys are problems. So as long as they can stay healthy, avoid the penalties that have been plaguing them for a long time,
Yep.
and just execute the offense, I do think this team can figure out how to get to 8, 9, 10 wins, bounce here, bounce there. But also it's about who your quarterback is. And the AFC has some legit power quarterbacks that just completely move the needle. The Raiders don't have that.
Yeah.
So they're not going to have the better quarterback on the field in most of the games they play. And I will caveat by saying that if Derek Carr was still here, they still wouldn't have the best quarterback on the field in most of the games. So I don't think this is a Carr versus Garoppolo issue. The rest of the Raiders roster is going to have to play well in those games to win. They're going to have to do on special teams. They have a kicker. They have a punter. They have an explosive returner in Carter.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason why they don't have a top 10 special team unit. The defense is going to have to create turnovers. There's going to be days like yesterday where they just couldn't get off the field on third down, but they have to create turnovers like that team in 2016 did. If they don't create turnovers and they're not explosive in the kicking game, it's gonna be a long season. But there is optimism here. I think they have played well. They do look buttoned up. They do look like they're on a mission. Crosby's leadership is off the charts with the amount of just swag that guy has, his cheering up the teammates on the sideline. The effort he gives down to down is unmatched in the National Football League. You have guys that are on this team that have bought into the Patriot way, you want to call it, that whatever you want to call it, it's going on in Vegas. So they have guys that have been around those kind of systems. They understand Josh McDaniels, what he wants to do. If this team goes out and wins 4 or 5 games, that's completely on Ziegler and McDaniels, and they're going to have to own that. But I just don't see that. I think there's enough star power on this team to get them into 8 or 9, 10 wins.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with you. I don't think we're gonna be in that situation that I thought we were gonna be in earlier in the year. But so I do feel a little bit optimistic as far as how the Raiders look. I think it's the defensive part of the football. They have to get in the third and long. They have to get off the field, and then that pass rush. They have to be built on that pass rush. Because I don't know if I trust that Raiders secondary just yet. But if they do stay secondary, if that secondary stays healthy, they can come together and start making some plays as far as that goes. All right, Raider Nation. Ryan, thank you again. A good job with the 53 man breakdown there. And we'll talk
I'll be wrong. I'll admit I'm probably going to miss 4 or 5 of those guys, but it happens every year.
But listen, Jacobs is back. That number 8 is going to look sweet for one season or maybe 2 seasons. Who knows? Maybe he'll come back next year. But like I said, offensively, I will say that the fact that most teams don't have what the Raiders have offensively. They really. I mean, even the good teams don't have what the Raiders have offensively. So, if you're gonna break up the team into thirds, offense, defense, special teams, 2 out of the 3 are really good. Are pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. All right, Raider Nation, take care. See you, Ryan.